Radio Free Albemuth by director John Allen Simon. Okay, straight up, this one is a deep cut. A film adaptation of a book that is kind of unadaptable to film. I know I said that about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas too, but that one's like Curious George by comparison. Well, maybe Curious George on acid. But I can't say it is for certain because in preparation, I actually read the book of this like last week-ish and said to myself upon finishing, this is unadaptable. Written by Philip K. Dick, aka Blade Runner bassist, and a lot more since then. This is part autobiographical, part theological, part philosophical, part political science, and part speculative fiction. Putting it right the heck over that Hunter S. Thompson druggy claptrap. It's a lot of parts all mixed into one juicy chicken McNugget of crazy. Seriously, I think Philip K. Dick had some unaddressed psychological issues or chemical imbalances. Probably a little or a lot of both. Main character Nick Brady is having some interesting dreams lately, and they become more and more compelling. His wife doesn't really understand, but she sees enough to kind of put up with it. Luckily for him, his best buddy is a science fiction book writer named Philip K. Dick, so Nicholas can at least talk to him about the crazy shit he's witnessing. He calls it VALIS, Vast Active Living Intelligence System, and has got some plans for him apparently, as society is getting further squashed by a fascist president. Not fake fascist, like a lot of people imagine. This here is a real fascist kind of shit. It's not good. This was Philip K. Dick's first attempt to describe some interesting events that may or may not have happened to him involving pink rays from an ancient satellite. Publishers at the time thought it was kind of unsellable rubbish, so he moved on, only to return to the story again a few years later in the form of the book VALIS, and its two subsequent books. Kind of. The third one, The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, is kind of by proxy. PKD had some health issues and died at the age of 53 before suitably finishing the VALIS trilogy he was working on. Way too young, considering he was just finally being recognized more for his thought-provoking storytellings. This one, like his Hugo Award-winning The Man in the High Castle, which is actually self-referentially mentioned here, is an alternate timeline of events setting up a certain fascist line of governments in the United States. So this film adaptation, it's a valiant effort, and at least pieces of it are actually fairly well done, given the weird source material. But having read the book recently, sometimes it's a bit hard to differentiate between what you're watching and those blanks your mind is subconsciously filling in without you knowing, because your brain is crafty pudding. So if you can find a copy of this film, it has some interesting concepts, especially when considering the other books by PKD. It is surprising, actually, given some of the religious connotations he delves into. But you may just want to read the book first. Published after he died because, well, why not? He wasn't going to be writing anymore. Just saying. Crap. Now I have to read VALIS again, don't I? That one is a lot thicker than this one, and pages and concept exploration. Questionable organization. FAP. But they prefer to be called Friends of the American People. It's full-on gaslighting though, folks. I don't really think they are our friends. Media notes. There's some minimal CGI editing, which is what it is. But then there's some full-on CGI scenes that are what these are. Not too many, fortunately. But despite their simplistic CGI nature, they convey the necessary info and move on from there. The story is not conventional by most standards. Actor note, Shea Wiggum as PKD does okay, I guess. I have a feeling he didn't really read much PKD, though. Alanis Morissette actually plays a key role here. A bit different look than in the book, but since it required some singing, she was okay in the role. The guy who plays Nick, sure. It's hard material to tackle this in the first place, especially from a guy whose sole directing credit is this. So for story, I'll give it 3.5 beers. I messed up my head reading the book beforehand, so it's an interesting story. Look, I'll give it 3.5 beers. Yeah, there's some dodgy CGI, but the fact that they pulled this one off in a somewhat realistic fashion, I give them some cred here. If you're into just a weird amalgamation of sci-fi, philosophy, and some theology, yeah, it's an interesting one to check out. Cheers.
Paintbrush from